We the people. 3 words that started a nation, but never meant all of us. For 250 years, the people who were left out have been the ones working the hardest to make this democracy real. From the indigenous nations whose governance systems the founders were inspired by, to the abolitionists hiding freedom seekers in their homes, to the civil rights marchers crossing bridges in Selma, every generation has faced its own founding moment. Today, we stand at another one of those moments. Now we're coming to the biggest, most awkward birthday party in the history of the world, America's 250th. Are we gonna continue to patch a house with a broken foundation that just keeps leaking, or are we finally gonna redesign and rebuild it for everyone? In this series, we've moved beyond rehashing and pointing out what's broken. We've been talking about how to build what's next, even when it feels impossible. We've talked about rewriting the rules, starting where we're at in our neighborhoods, cities, and states, and finally becoming the we in We the People. Today, we bring it all together. Where and who we've come from, what a blueprint looks like for a foundation that holds everyone, and how to become the founders of a nation we have never seen, a true multiracial democracy where everyone can thrive. I'm Baratunde Thurston, and this is the finale of In the Making, a series from PolicyLink about how we carry this work forward. And that's what my guest and I are here to talk about today. Welcome, Ashleigh. Welcome, Michael. What's up?
It's good to be with you, brother.
Good to have you back. I want to start with history. What I have found as I've learned more about American history, generally speaking, when you start digging into history, you don't find good news. Usually when you start digging into history, in my experience, you find more bodies. It's like, oh, there's a massacre I didn't know about. There was a racial uprising or racial riot or something I didn't know about. There's a grave over here I didn't know about. So I'm like tired of it. It's like, I get it. The country has an awkward and tortured history. And so it was really surprising to me to start looking into the history of this country and its founding and find good news. And I found some good news that I feel like we all should have known about. I was disappointed in myself for not knowing and felt a little shame about it, that there was democracy here before any Europeans got here. And did y'all grow up knowing that?
No.
I did not.
Me neither, right? And we're educated Black folk. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to hold a moment for that, because I feel like each of us was raised in a certain way. We got educated, we got re-educated to not just swallow whole the positive only story of America as a city on a hill and manifest destiny and all that stuff. So yeah, it was fascinating and really interesting to me. So here's the point. Before white people showed up on this land, there was democracy being practiced by indigenous nations. There was democracy being practiced by indigenous nations. That's a huge reveal. And I came to this through a set of relationships, which is a different video and a longer conversation, but suffice it to say that the Haudenosaunee Confederacy was 6 nations, still are 6 nations, living under the Great Law of Peace. And they were the folks that these settlers and colonists encountered most. And so there were these hundreds of years of relationship. And they have a democracy premised on these beautiful values that remind me of what we've been talking about here. They're values like reciprocal relationship with nature, women at the center of governance. Yes, I looked at you on purpose, Madam President. They're values like a commitment to 7th-generation thinking in terms of your decisions and how they affect 7 generations from now. That the highest calling of government is peace, and that law is grounded in the sacred and aligned with life. So I hear that, and I'm just like, okay, this gives all of us a different relationship with the founding story of the country. It's not that Europe came up with this thing and Europeans here came up with this thing and it's been imposed and it was never meant for us. It's like, well, the founders that we acknowledge were heavily inspired by this indigenous democracy that was already here. They did a very imperfect adaptation of that. And now we're living in the results of that. And so we have an opportunity to revisit that. And that story of the excluded participants giving the most is something we do know about, even if we didn't know that story. We see it in the formerly enslaved people who brought actual freedom to a nation that professed it for so long. We've seen it in the labor movement, bringing the 8-hour workday. We've seen it in the LGBTQ plus movement, bringing marriage equality. And so this country has this funny relationship with other. Paul Mooney, remember this Black comedian Paul Mooney? He has a joke. I'm gonna modify slightly. I'm gonna modify slightly for our audience. Everybody wanna be Black, but nobody wanna be Black. They want the culture without the people. And I feel like that's some of the story with the Indigenous democracy. They wanted some of these principles, but they just wanted the land more than the people. They wanted the Black music without the Black bodies. And so we're trying to write that. We're trying to revisit that. And I guess what I'm curious about with y'all is, what does it mean to reclaim that truth? And what does it make possible for us when we acknowledge that we are actually a part of, an essential part of the story of this place and the reality of this place?
I think it means that we get to remember, we get to reactivate our brilliance, our wisdom, our creativity. When I think about, we've had a chance in these conversations to talk about our personal stories. And when I think about all of the times that I've had to rebuild, what I get to remember is the pain of it, the loss, the failures, but also the wins, the progress, and the victory. And so ultimately what we remember is our power. And to me, that really is what's special about acknowledging that we're not the first, that this isn't the first time. We get to tap into brilliance and wisdom and creativity, the best of our intentions, and also the lessons from the failures and the imperfections.
Remember our power.
Yes.
I find that helpful, because I think there's a version of this story where we just remember the relentless fight, and we remember the pain and the struggle and the loss. And so that can lead to pessimism, cynicism, and tapping out. But you're focused on the other side, remembering what we've done.
We're powerful.
Remember that power. What about you, Michael? What does it do for you, in your mind, for us, to reclaim that role that we've had? And what does it unlock for our future when we do that?
Well, just as we're remembering our power, I would say we need to tap into what our ancestors are telling us to do now. So we can bridge from that past to that future state. Because so often we will remember the past, we'll even feel that we're powerful, but we don't necessarily take the next step. Our ancestors are inviting us to do something.
Not just celebrate them.
Not just celebrate them, right? And so I would like us to still our bodies, call back our breath, and really think about, what are they whispering to us? What do they want us to do now that we've rediscovered who we are, right? So for me, that's what I'm often reminded of in my own walk, which is, okay, now that I know that I'm powerful, I know the powerful things they've done, what's the chapter for me to write? Right? And that can be scary. And we oftentimes give our power away as soon as we get that thought. And so for me, the journey is to remember and to stay dogged about not giving it away again by acting confused or uncertain, because that's just part of the territory that we've got to navigate. We won't know. It will be uncertain, and it will be challenging. And that's why remembering that power that Ashleigh's talking about is so important as we start that journey of enacting a new possibility with our power.
The thing I remember most about what we're up to here and what PolicyLink has put out there is refounding. It's bold. It's really big. It's not renovating. It's not reform. It's refounding. And that's daunting. When you look back at Reconstruction, at women's suffrage, at civil rights, what are some lessons that we can apply to hear from those ancestors, those whispers, about what it takes and how to actually transform a nation?
You know, I think it takes remembering that they didn't do it with grant programs. We might as well just start right there. They did not. And so we are quite privileged because they did not do it with grant programs.
Yeah.
So we just start right there.
Real one.
So we'll start right there. And that it was not popular when they were leading.
That part.
We romanticize the kumbaya aspects of these journeys, but they were lonely journeys where their own people didn't believe they could do it.
It's not that they walked into it already with an organized majority. They had to build that thing, but it first took someone to believe that more was possible. And then to say it out loud, flat-footed, with your chest, right? Like, there's more that's possible. And to organize people around that new vision, that was required every time. You've asked us before about our research. And what we saw, the advantage that we have, is that the majority of people in this nation actually believe that democracy should work for everyone.
Okay, that's important. That's important to establish that.
Right?
We have a majority who want to be a part of this.
Yes, that want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
The challenge is that one thing that's required, belief, we're missing all of that. We've been beat down so much that it feels impossible because in 250 years, we've never achieved it. And so, when I sit with that, and it's like, well, what does that mean for us then? Like, everybody wants it, nobody believes it. What I'm reminded by is that we believe it. And if all it takes is a small group, but we got that, right? And so it is a belief and then a willingness to act, to Michael's point.
So we've covered a lot of ground in our series together. The unfinished nature of the democracy, becoming we, not just me, that's my little twist on it, but it's how do we become more of a collective mind around these things? Rewriting rules, rebuilding the foundation of the government itself, rooting in local. And when the federal government's off acting the fool, we still have home to build from and model. What do you feel is most important for people to take away from these themes across this In the Making series? I'm gonna start with you.
I would like people to remember that we're clear about what time it is. We've gotten really good at providing mutual aid for each other, and we need to continue to do that. We're really good at providing charity. We need to continue to do that. And if we want charity and mutual aid to be less needed, then we need to tend to the design of the nation. And that requires not getting everything in a soundbite, not getting everything simply distilled down in an elevator pitch. It requires you to deal with the structures of governing, the Constitution, the laws, the regulations, the policies, things that people may think are not sexy or don't want to take time to deal with. But if you don't take time to deal with them, you will be oppressed by them. It's just the reality, whether you like it or not. There is just some work you have to do, whether you like it or not. And we are at a place in this nation that our outcomes are at a standstill. And so I want people to recognize that we can do mutual aid, we can do charity, and we can do redesigning the nation all at the same time. And this is the time where we're educated enough and skilled enough to hold it all and do it all. That's what we got to do.
Thank you. What do you want to add on that, Ashleigh? What do you want people to really take away from this experience with us?
Well, we called the thing In the Making.
Yes.
We called it In the Making for a reason. The one thing that folks have to accept is that the founding was not a one-time event. It is ongoing. You have to believe that in order to lean into Michael's invitation. So that's one thing I want folks to hold. The other is we have to do this work for all. We've talked a bunch, right, about we gotta build a new consciousness, an all consciousness that first allows us to believe that everyone can thrive and then that we would demand it. We've nerded out this year, right? And the thing that folks can hold is if you can believe that everyone can flourish in this nation, then the next thing is just hold on to the idea that there is a constitutional amendment that already declares that it ought to be so. And so that with that foundation laid, we get to just lean into that thing, right? And demand that we finally live into those promises. So I think the first is just the founding is ongoing, which means that we get to be co-founders. And then the second is that the promise of all that's in the Constitution, in the opening part, that feels like, to some folks like it was a lie. By the time we get to amendment number 14, there's a tool and a lever that we can build from.
And there's two things in Ashleigh's comments that I think are important for us to hold on to. One is, if you're somebody who says, I wish those people would stop being so angry. Why we got to talk about race, why we got to talk about sexual identity, class, et cetera.
Identity politics.
Identity politics. Well, all you got to do is just live into the all. If you design for all, we ain't got to ever talk about all that. That's all you got to do. And on the flip side of that is, until you do it, it's going to be waiting for you, whether you do it today or 1,000 years from now. And that is just the harsh reality of where we are at. The nation is stuck. Initiatives, projects, new frameworks, none of it. You can't fancy and outsmart yourself trying to think that you're going to do this differently. All is just all. And until you do that work, we are stuck and we're going to be at a standstill.
If we just name and throw in the side personality types, I might add to that. If you're the person in your family who always has something to say, who, is never good enough, you got a critique or something, this is your moment. This is your moment. We need you.
Oh, man. I'm loving this. Like, if you want to have people stop complaining about racism, why don't you end racism? All the complaints will go away. If you want to have people stop complaining about sexism, let's end the sexism. Design for all, and all this complaining and whining goes away. That's how it's probably more efficient. We've tried the other way. We've tried not doing that and just having these moments of escalating complaint and effort and resistance and the backlash, right? The forward and the back. What if we just design for all and then we can move on to new problems? Like fixing the Wi-Fi in this country. Real stuff.
That's right.
It's trash, y'all.
And the ultimate thing to do to start living into all of this doesn't even cost money.
Whoa. Uh-oh.
Imagine if all of us who sit at the nexus of money and power and run institutions just stopped hurting people. Just stopped hurting people and stopped hurting the planet. You could do that today. Doesn't require money. And that's the beauty about what we're offering here, is that's why we call it soul work, because the dollars and all the other gimmicks will not help us see ourselves through this.
Yeah. I want to name that we are having a very United States of America-centric conversation, generally speaking, in the series. And in the work, generally speaking, but we're not alone, right? We live on a big, wonderful planet called Earth, and we are interconnected and interdependent with a lot of other nations, and they're going through similar things. The progress and the backlash, the question of who thrives, who gets to define what thriving is. Latin America, Europe, many countries in the continent of Africa and Asia are having the same dance. Who is this all for? Is it all? What do you think we can learn, not just across time, as we've talked about a lot, but across space in this conversation about having the all consciousness, about a democracy that works for all?
I'm reminded of a webinar that I had the privilege to speak at. And, one of the comments in the chat was just like, yeah, I hear you on the love thing and it all sounds really good. But when someone is actively trying to hurt me, I just can't see my way past that. And it felt like a moment that we did need to step out of the United States context to realize it's not just us. We're not the only ones who experience this. And in that moment, what I recall, like what I was remembering was, post-Holocaust Germany, post-apartheid South Africa. And what struck me is that what felt big about their response was the truth-telling and the commitment to reconciliation. And so I have just really appreciated this set of conversations because it feels like it's the beginning of us leaning into really telling the truth, not just about like what we think is going to take, but how we feel, like everything from the grief of it all to having to forgive when nobody apologized, like that we're finally leaning into those conversations. But the second thing, when you think of those examples, the thing that immediately then comes up is like, well, in a couple of these examples, it didn't stick. Folks are still struggling and fussing and fighting with each other. And that brings me back to the second takeaway, which is at the end of the day, the government has to deliver, right? And so we can do all of the hard things and the caring things, and we must. And then we actually have to deliver. And so we can't just symbolically have the words. That's part of what we've been living, right? Is all the beautiful promises. But folks actually have to see things change in their real lives, better outcomes.
Places outside this country gives us great hope about what it looks like to never be defeated, to have reclaimed their freedom. And so, and I guess the last thing I would say is a personal thing, because over the last year, I've bounced around thinking, I'm gonna lead this country. I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go there. And I keep coming right on back to that's just right. I'm gonna be right there. Yes. There I will be, and with all these same issues. The issue of all will be right there waiting for me. And so it brings me right on back to staying here and trying to make this nation better. The context may be different, but the work is the same. And that's what I take away from all of my travels around the world is everybody wants to put a different flavor on it. It's still oppression. It's still harm. And we need to just stop getting fancy and stick with what we're talking about at this table. So ultimately what I would say to people who are listening to this, whether you're in the United States or anywhere, that this is just the work for the world. You know, and our souls need to be still and really take that in. We often are so busy just trying to get to the next thing. Like, well, a lot of us, we go to conferences and there's always some arrogant ass that's always like, well, what is the solution?
I know that guy. It's always a guy.
So, what's the solution?
Just saying.
Yeah, it's probably Bob.
Right, you know, the solution right now is to make your ass be still and really decide, do you want to live into this? We did it during COVID. We got still, and imagine how nature started coming back. You heard different sounds. The world needs to be still and make some choices. And that's what we got to do. Now, that probably won't happen, but in our own walk, we can do that. In our own organizations, we can practice a form of that. And that's what we're trying to do at PolicyLink. Instead of telling everybody else what to do and proselytizing externally, this has really been a conversation with you and through these series that are about our own walk and our own struggles with this walk and what we got to do.
Can I just, one other thing, I think we've spoken about it before, but probably not enough. It's hard work. Because I think we think about the hard work as like the redesigning the systems part, like that's hard. No, but being in these new kinds of like relating to each other differently and trying to grow personally while you grow as a collective. I just want to make sure people don't think we're being naive or Pollyannish. It is hard work, and yet it's necessary.
There's so many threads coming together here. I'm thinking about this great law of peace and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy as some of the roots of our own democracy, where part of the system's design in that form of government is to forge relationships and maintain them. That the principle that law is grounded in the sacred and aligned with life is about ritual, it's about tradition, it's about having excuses to come together seasonally. It's about structural alliances that cross national lines. You know, their clan system and clan mothers is a whole thing. You should really look it up. Well, we have a whole book we can talk about it later. But that's part of the work. And it's not just the whiteboard exercise of crafting the structure. It's the living inside the structure. That's the hard work. And we don't do that alone. We live with others. And so the commitment to being in relationship, thick and thin and all that, we're renewing our vows. America, will you marry me? That's ultimately what this, you don't have to believe in the institution of marriage, I get it. But this is a deep relationship that we're in. Some of us thrust into it without choice. Some of our ancestors dragged kicking and screaming into it, and yet we're here right now. So we get to choose, like a two-party relationship in an intimate sense. I choose you, you choose me, so we gotta choose each other every day. Well, look, the series is ending here, and the work absolutely continues. So what is your offer, invitation, suggestion for people who wanna stay engaged, who wanna join, right, who wanna do that joining in the work of redesigning a democracy that works for all?
Well, I would say there's a lot of things we could do, but I think one of the most immediate things is to invite people to our summit, August 24th to the 28th, right outside Washington, D.C., because that will be the place where we can co-create together and we can begin to walk together.
And Ashleigh and I can sing together.
Oh, yeah.
That's August 24th to 28th, 2026, National Harbor, Washington, D.C., my hometown.
All right. And if you can't come to the summit, start where you are. If the 14th Amendment and the redesign of the nation feels far, you get, the great news is you get to start right where you are. If what you feel is that more is possible, whether it's about the trash pickup, the school, what the schools are delivering, what your local community clinic is or isn't doing, you can start right there. You just have to believe more is possible, organize a few friends, agree on the vision, and start building towards it. And then our commitment, PolicyLink's commitment, the ecosystem that we're a part of, is that we also feel responsible for building a network that reaches you. So more to come there.
And the last thing I would add is you mentioned it, I think in the last segment, you started talking about what was happening in Minneapolis called neighboring. Not a new concept, but a new concept in this era, right? People don't need to get fancy. Your neighbors need to be fed still. Even when there's not a crisis, folks need food. Somebody needs their lawn cut. Somebody needs you to make sure that their kids can walk home safely. There's so many simple ways we can show care for each other that is about the all. And that's the perfect place to start. You don't have to get into all the policy stuff just yet. Just get to know your neighbors. Just pick up the trash, sweep the street, all those little things that we're waiting for someone else to do, waiting for the city that's never gonna do it, right? Take that graffiti down, whatever it might be. And so I just invite people to think about right in their neighborhood, to Ashleigh's calling, to think about what would it look like to start these relationships with the people that live right next door.
So here we are, 250 years into this little experiment called the United States of America. And the question remains, can a nation founded on exclusion become a democracy of inclusion? Can we, the people, actually mean all of us? Throughout this series, we've talked about the faulty foundation that was never quite right, the rigged system, the chaos we're living through right now. We've also talked about something else, though, the possibility that's always existed when people refuse to accept reality as it is and aspire to bring us closer to the ideals of the nation, ones that were held by the original Indigenous stewards of this land. Those who wrote the Constitution, who we call founders, they didn't give us democracy. I need you to hear me on that. Nobody can give you democracy. It's a practice. But they did write down a beautiful starting point. And for 250 years, the people they excluded the most have done the most to bring us all closer to that promise. The indigenous people of this land, the abolitionists, the suffragettes, the civil rights marchers, the water protectors, the immigrant rights activists, the students, organizers, parents, and neighbors. Now it's our turn. Not to fix the broken system, but to build a system worthy of us. Not to wait for permission, but to redesign and rebuild the nation that we want to live in. And not to hope somebody else will do it, but to become the founders ourselves. We cannot outsource this job. Because this nation is still in the making. We the people, we're in the making too. And the future we want and deserve, a real democracy, where everyone has what they need to thrive, that's in the making right now. And it's our work to do, together. I'm Baratunde Thurston, and this has been a privilege for me to participate in. This is In the Making, a series from PolicyLink. Thank you, Michael McAfee. Thank you, Ashleigh Gardere. Thank you to the whole team pulling this whole conversation together, including you. The series ends, but the work continues.